Very excited for the Disruptors Club session today. Today we're going to hear from some incredible founders from across the continent who are doing amazing things with tech and innovation to disrupt traditional industries. Before we start, I'll give you a quick intro and I'll ask you guys a few questions so we can ease into the session. So I'm your moderator. My name is Caleb Maru, and I write a newsletter called Tech Safari that tells stories about innovators, founders, and disruptors from across the continent. I'm also lucky to sit on both sides of the founder and investor spectrum. I have a small fund that invests in early stage startups and have run companies across the continent for the last 5 years. So I have a lot of appreciation for the folks who are here speaking about their companies and the innovation that they have created in their industries. Today, before we dive in, I just wanted to check in on who's in the room. So who has been to Côte d'Ivoire before? Who's been to Abidjan before? Hands up. Okay, whose first time is it here? Cool. How are you finding the humidity? It's okay? Okay, who here is a CEO or a founder? Okay, who here is an investor? All right, everyone's looking at you. Everyone's gonna pitch you after this. And who here works at a startup or a company that you would say uses innovation and technology? All right, quite a few of us. Good. Without any further ado, I will hand it over to Ida Dare to introduce the session. Ida is the Senior Vice President and Head of Sub-Saharan Africa at Visa, and Visa is one of the most active startup ecosystem builders, as we'll hear from Ida soon.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everyone. I had the privilege to attend the session earlier, the cocktail on fintechs, and truly enjoyed the conversation and the frank discussions around funding and challenges as our fintechs are growing and looking for support. It is certainly a privilege for me to welcome you to this session. It is the second that we are sponsoring because I believe, and Visa believes, that disruptors, innovators are at the core of the future development on the continent, and we should ensure that we continue to encourage them and provide, the environment for them to continue to disrupt, the way business is conducted. I would like to start by sharing with you a journey that just in the context of finance indicates the evolution that we are currently going through. If we can move to the slides. Innovation has been at the core of how financial services have been currently evolving. We have done a phenomenal job at continuing to drive access and creating more opportunities for merchants and for customers. In the context of what we are currently experiencing, technology is providing us with tons of opportunity and is becoming the catalyst for accelerated payment and cash digitization. Today, you can go to a point of sale and make a transaction where available. Mobile network operators have done a phenomenal job at driving access and at providing financial services to more, both from a issuance side, meaning the consumer who wants to go and make purchases, and from an acceptance side, giving the opportunity for merchants to get online and to offer their services online and accept digital payments. What I had on the slide that is not showing, but I'm going to talk to it, and then when you see it, you can relate to what I'm saying, is that today somebody who needs to send money to their loved ones, let's say to pay for a funeral or provide support, can, through their phones, in a matter of seconds, offer the possibility to receive payment at the other side of the same country. It is empowered by technology. More importantly, from an acceptance standpoint, and COVID has been quite interesting in that front, it has demonstrated that those businesses that were able to digitize their offering and digitize their payments were the most resilient to the crisis. And we've seen a number of new players enter that space, but technology was the catalyst of that, yeah? It's about the ability to get online. It's about the ability to access, tokenization. It's the ability to be able to do onboarding, digital onboarding. And all this is driven by access to technology. But what are the challenges? What is it that we are looking at? Here is the famous slide. What are the challenges that we're facing? The challenges are about infrastructure. Today, we still do not have enough access, and we've heard about it during the cocktail earlier, yeah? When you look at the number of people who have access to broadband internet, who have access to even fiber, that number is very low. It is believed that, out of the 25 countries that have less access, 21 of these countries are in sub-Saharan Africa, unfortunately. We have 300 million people who live 50 kilometers or more away from fiber or broadband access. It is our reality today. So the challenge is, how do we collectively drive further connectivity to the continent? The other challenge that we have is policy and regulation driven. Sometimes technology goes faster than what the regulator can absorb and regulate. We've seen instances in market like Kenya, for example, where the regulators came together, the competition authority, the Central Bank of Kenya, the authorities regulating telecom, coming together and providing a framework to really not only protect consumers, but also enable innovation. And these dialogues need to happen across the continent to just make sure that the policies remain a catalyst for innovation and accelerated growth, but at the same time provide the same protection to the consumers. Affordability is also another one, yeah? Affordability, it's still very, very expensive in our part of the world to access to data, to access to internet. And this is work that needs to continue to be implemented and developed by all the stakeholders, in the ecosystem. And then you have the ecosystem readiness that is foundational. Really, as we go digital, as technology evolves, the question of security comes into place. How do we provide the right tools, the right processes to protect the ecosystem and ensure that we continue to drive innovation in the proper way? You have technology, I mentioned tokenization, that takes your data, protects it, allows the data to be transmitted while your information remains secure. So these are the kind of technology that we want to make sure we continue to develop. And then it's also about making sure that as technology evolves, we make that available to consumers in our line of operations. Now you can use your own phone to receive payments. You can use the tap-to-phone technology to make sure that instead of having those heavy, cumbersome POSs, you enable payment in a more cost-effective way. QR technology is another one that has been instrumental to driving more access. I wanted to share with you a few examples of fintechs that have played such a key role, disruptors in our field. And I'm going to start with a company called Little Fish. Little Fish is based out of South Africa. And as they looked at the ecosystem, they understood how complicated it was for a small business, like a micro business, to enter the digital space. And what they have decided to do is, through a single API integration, allow that small micro merchant to get online, allow that micro merchants to have access to the back-end technology and infrastructure that will allow them to do their accounting and their finances at a very, very cost-effective way in a record speed. This company is growing and is looking at 50,000 merchants to add in a matter of a couple of months. Phenomenal impact in terms of what they could do. Another example is Orange in Botswana. Orange had decided to, get out of the closed loop and provide more payment capabilities to consumers. And what they've done is built into their offering virtual and digital credentials. They have now more than 400,000 consumers, and the rate of activation is just phenomenal compared to traditional players. And last one is, that I'm going to talk about, is Kuda Bank in Nigeria, a bank that has just understood customer service, value proposition, a neobank, yeah? All digital, but providing, again, with consumers access. No need to go to a bank with heavy onboarding, processes, still in line with the requirements of the countries where they operate, don't get me wrong. But that user experience is second to none and driving phenomenal access and activation. So as Visa, we believe that innovators, disruptors are at the core of economic development. We, in our own way, try to enable the ecosystem. We've made a commitment not too long ago to invest $1 billion in Africa, just helping our partners get on board, get onto the network, and continue to drive the innovation. We have a couple of programs like the Visa Everywhere initiatives where we put innovators and disruptors in competition and then give them access to financial institutions that would be willing to support and invest in their infrastructure. And the other thing that we are doing, and it's challenging, believe you me, because we are changing our operations in a way to make the network more accessible to these innovators, in terms of onboarding capabilities, in terms of the requirements for them to access the network, and in terms also of giving them access to the security, the tools, and the processes so much needed to operate in our environment. I spoke about the financial industry, but whatever I said in terms of foundations of innovation and disruptions apply to pretty much all sectors of the activities in our continent. So we are bullish, we are optimistic, and we wish all the disruptors the best of luck for tonight. Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you so much, Ida. That was brilliant. Visa is obviously a big champion of the ecosystem, and today you're going to see a lot of reasons to be bullish about the future of startups on the continent. Let me just run you through how it's going to go, and then we'll get right into some of these great keynotes. So there's going to be 5 speakers today. I'm going to introduce each of them. I'll invite them up. They're going to present what they do and who they are and what they're building. And then I'm going to ask them a few questions, and we'll open up to have 1 or 2 questions from the crowd. So that's how it's going to run. I'm going to introduce our very first speaker, Omar Hagras, who is the CEO of Trello. Let's hear it for Omar.
All right. Okay, we don't have a slide. We did have a slide, but then they told us there's no screens, but it's fine. All right, hello everyone. My name is Omar Hagras. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Trella, and I'm here to tell you a little bit more about our story. In 2015, I was lucky enough to join a company called Uber. I was one of the first people to join Uber in the region, and when I joined, I think we're doing approximately 100 trips a day. 9 months later, we're doing 1 million trips a day. What was really impressive was not necessarily the growth, was not necessarily how the product really solved the big problem. What was really impressive was the impact that Uber had on our communities and our economies. I remember the first onboarding session I had at Uber. I onboarded 77 drivers. Back then, Uber just launched in Egypt, and a lot of the economy in the country was struggling. A lot of political instability was also taking place, and a lot of the drivers we onboarded did not have a job. I remember after the session, one driver came to me and said, gave me a big hug and said, "Thank you, you saved my life." And this left a profound impact on me and made me think what type of impact or what type of change we want to make in our communities and our societies. I was lucky enough to travel the world with Uber. I launched Uber in Europe, Middle East, and Africa. And then I got my calling. One day I was going through the newsletter, and then I found this stat that said the cost of moving goods in Africa is 4 times more expensive than it is in more developed economies. Maybe to give more color to that, on a more granular level, on an SKU level, moving goods ranges from 17 to 20% of the total cost of the SKU in Africa versus 5 to 6% in more developed economies. And this got me thinking. While moving people reliably and safely was a noble cause, I thought maybe moving back to Egypt and launching Trella in our world was moving and was interesting for me. So I came back and we launched Trella. Trella is a technology marketplace that connects between supply and demand. To put it in more simple terms, in our case, supply are the truck drivers and demand are bigger companies, the likes of Coca-Cola, the likes of shipping lines, manufacturers, you can name it. Maybe to give you a little bit more context on the problems we're trying to solve and how tough it is, I came across a quote that I wanted to share with you. Quote, "Stable and flourishing economies are built on reliable access to global and intercontinental trade. Africa's potential is limited by inadequate port and trade bottlenecks, putting the brakes on economic growth in some of the world's fastest growing economies." And if you are to put this in simpler terms, you'd realize that there's so much we can do by building the right infrastructure. And the right infrastructure here is not just ports. It could be a software infrastructure. It could be way more of what we're trying to do. And to simplify this even further, it takes 2 to 4 days to load or unload a truck in the ports in Africa versus 2 to 4 hours in the US or in Europe. And a lot of the solutions we're trying to build is to simplify the process. Trella's mission is to boost economies by empowering our customers with the technology and the platform to reduce the costs of moving goods. And that's what keeps us going every day. We have a vision to become a one-stop logistical solution, starting by trucking, then venturing into warehousing, financing, and so forth. We're tackling a $200 billion industry, and we feel that there's a lot of inefficiencies that we can tackle. We believe that by focusing on the problems, being more customer-centric, and serving more parts of the value chain, we will be able to reduce the cost of moving goods. All in all, I think we've raised approximately $60 million to solve the problem in Africa. It looks good from the outside, but it's quite challenging. A lot of our investors, some of them are here. We're lucky enough to have Maersk and Orange as some of our backers. And lastly, Trella was built on the belief that it can make our world a better place. While we're still a long way ahead, yeah, I'd like to think we're on the right track. Thank you.
Okay, we'll give them a second. Until then, I might use my voice to speak. But I was really moved by that, by what you were saying around it taking 4 days to unload a truck that's at a port. And I had a quote that I just looked up, a story I found online which says that it costs $4,000 to move a 40-foot container from Shanghai to Lagos in Nigeria. Oh, hello? Okay, we're on. Cool. It costs $4,000 to move a 40-foot container from from Shanghai to Lagos in Nigeria. And to move that container from Apapa port in Lagos to Lagos mainland costs $4,000. A 20-minute ride costs the same amount as a whole world trip. So, this is kind of a lead up to a question I have for you, Omar, which is logistics is so hard and so expensive. What are the biggest challenges to us having better flowing logistics on the continent?
I think the first thing is it shouldn't be expensive. So I think a lot of the problems we're facing on why it's expensive is because it's very hard and it's very inefficient. And a lot of the solutions we're trying to solve is how to make this more harmonious in a way. So I think there are a few things that we look at, and if I am to summarize this, I would maybe put transparency is a big issue. So be it price transparency, load availability, load tendering, load booking, whatever you want to say, it really is a big problem. Cooperation is a problem. I think a lot of cross-border transactions happen between African nations, and if the borders are not in tune or in line, you would face a lot of challenges here and there. And then I think the third part is access to financing. So a lot of people look at supply chain and logistics thinking it's a supply chain issue, when a lot of them actually think it's more of a financing game rather than a supply chain game. A lot of our friends would be able to solve a lot of problems if they do have that access to financing. And then I think lastly is how a lot of the trade barriers can be removed by just simple communication or simple technologies such as blockchain and stuff like that. So I think you can go on and on how to solve a lot of the problems here, but those would be the top of the challenges on top of my head.
Awesome. Those sound like 3 or 4 really big sort of problems to solve for. I think on the continent, especially in the last year, we've seen quite a few companies take big hits. Companies like Okada, a few others that have really struggled doing logistics on the continent. With that in the sort of background, what does it take to build a good, solid logistics company or logistics startup on the continent? And how are you doing it at Trella?
I don't think we're doing anything different, but I think a few things that a lot of companies, we've also been through this mistake. I think if you stay true to your mission, you operate within your core values and never forget your core values, try to solve the problem rather than just going out there and finding the solution, and really be laser focused on your customers and the people who are leading this company. I know this sounds like jargon, but I think this really is the most important things on building that. If you stay true to these things, things are going to get figured out in a way.
All right, cool. Yeah, nice. And I guess last question from me before we take it to the audience is, what role do you think e-logistics will play, e-logistics startups will play in the African continental free trade area's success? What do you think the role is?
So I've actually took note of this. We've been actively talking with the Flexim Bank, and we do have a lot of back and forth with a lot of the e-logistics players as well, some of which are very good friends of ours and are sitting here in the room. But I think, like, at core, what we're trying to do is actually to raise the standards of living. Because while making trade more accessible, while making trade easier and less costly, you do actually impact the economy in one way or another. So that's the number one, which goes back to the mission and the value. Then the second thing is how to make everything interconnected. So if you're moving a truckload from Cairo to Cape Town one day, how to make sure that this whole load goes smoothly from the north to the south or whatever it goes without a lot of barriers. It's much easier said than done, I know, but that would be the dream one day.
Awesome.
Cool.
Thanks so much, Omar. So we're going to take it to the audience. We might do one or two questions. Who has a question for Omar? Hands up. I see you. Yes. You might have to use your voice.
Yeah, so Omar, my question is basically around the fact that you're trying to optimize a very traditional sector. So how much do you see the sector you're working in being ready for that level of efficiency you're trying to bring, right? Do you find enthusiasm, or do you have to do a lot of work around education? And how much do you think, what do you think is required to actually get the sector to be possibly more enthusiastic about efficiency? Or is there a conscious effort to actually not create efficiency?
Oh, well, been a while. Good to always see you. I think a lot of people usually look at technology in a way that somehow reduces the impact of what technology can bring on board. If we say our mission is to reduce the cost of moving goods, then if our product, our technology, and everything we're trying to build does not try to solve for better pricing and reduce the cost of moving goods, then I don't think we're solving the right problem. I think what happens with a lot of e-logistics players is that they go for maybe more fancy things like, I don't know, traceability, visibility, or all of that. Go to some of the largest players out there and tell them, I'll give you visibility over your 1,000 loads that you're moving every day. They might not necessarily care. But tell them, I'll reduce the price of those 1,000 loads by 10%, obviously without subsidizing, by really building, lowering idle time, lowering cost per kilometer, enabling for more efficiencies. You will sign this customer instantly. So now the question is, can you get to that 10% easily? No, it's a lot of work. It's a lot of work to be able to reduce the prices from 10 to 20%. But I think once you do that, then this is what I would really call disruption, in my opinion. So, answer is, I do think people are ready, and I'm not sure if people were solving the right problems in the past few years.
That's a really awesome insight. And I think my insight from that is also like, we always think innovation or disruption is this massive new technology or massive like push in a new trend, but actually it's these like 10, 20% changes that can make all the difference in terms of margins for these
100%.
businesses. Yeah, awesome. And we might do one more question from the audience. Is that a hand there? Yes, over there.
One of the challenges facing transportation is the operatives of the business, of the transportation itself, in terms of what goes on in the routes. So how has your technology been able to assist you in overcoming some of the bottlenecks you've met within the operation of the transportation business?
So just to make sure I get the question right, you're talking about within the load itself, having those updates and traceability and being able to know what's happening with this particular load, correct? Sure. I think so. Short answer is we do have a control tower. A lot of these loads are actually online, if you want to put it this way, are either traced by GPS or either traced by the phone. But I think what's really is more important here is that this control tower does not necessarily only solve for traceability. I think a lot of this now and a lot of what we're trying to do is to make sure that, let's say we have a load going on from Cairo to Alexandria, and let's say this is a long haul. It's not, but let's assume it's a long haul. And then you have a lot of stops for these drivers. Now we want to start building a lot of partnerships with maintenance, truck maintenance solutions, petrol stations, and all of that to make sure that these guys are also well taken care of in one way or another. So I think solving for traceability and transparency is actually the easier problem, and that's how we're doing it, by also adding more support to the drivers during the trip itself.
Awesome. Omar, thank you so much. Let's hear it for Omar. Tap him off and cheers. Great, thanks Omar. So we're going to move on to our next speaker disruptor for this session, Jasper Graf von Hardenberg, from the CEO of Daystar Power. Jasper, come up. Let's hear it for Jasper.
Okay, thanks a lot for having me. So my name's Jasper. I'm originally from Germany, but have been now living and working in Nigeria for the last couple of years. And the company I'm running there and co-founded is called Daystar Power. And it's all about energy. So I would like to talk about energy a bit in this short session that I have with you. So energy is really at the heart of our modern civilization. Right? We use it to produce goods at scale, move products across continents, see Trella, and we power our digital infrastructure with it. And if we think of energy really being behind our modern civilization, this modern age probably began with something very humble like the steam engine hundreds of years ago. And it was only in the 1830s when steam-powered ships actually started being commercially viable in transporting goods, across the sea. And then it took another 50 years for these actually being competitive, consistently competitive against sailing boats for transatlantic journeys. So it took 50 years for this change to happen of moving from the sail to actually steam-powered. And it was then in the same 1880s when electricity was for the first time commercially produced in London by Thomas Edison. And this then set off this 140-year-old long journey until today of electrifying our world, right? Everything we see around us, it's electricity. The lights, the screens we have here, everything's electric. And this trend of electrifying everything is still continuing. It hasn't stopped. It started with the street lighting in London with Thomas Edison. It went on to sewing machines, conveyor belts, air conditioning, computers, and electric cars are probably the latest and greatest what we're electrifying. So moving everything electric has been going on for the last 140 years, and it's still continuing. And it has started doing that long before we're talking about global warming, getting to net zero, reducing carbon emissions. This is a trend that's been going on for a long time. And it's very clear why it's been going on, because electricity is really the most convenient form of energy we have. It's clean, it's accessible, available at the switch of a button. Who would want to go back to lighting candles here, and cleaning oil lamps or anything like that? So electric is here to stay, and it's going to continue to electrify the whole world around us. Now, what does that mean, actually? It means that in practice, companies are stopping research and development in petrol and diesel engines. It means that businesses around the world are putting their effort into electrifying production, logistics, distribution. Every aspect of the business are being electrified. And this is now being turbocharged by the green revolution, right? Net zero is a big topic. This whole development is accelerating even more. And at the same time, what we've happened now in the world is that renewable energy has been developing quite strongly, especially wind and solar power. And they have been developing so well, actually, that the unit cost of producing solar or wind electricity is now cheaper than producing electricity from oil, gas, or nuclear fission. Right? So we're really at a point now where renewables make an incredible lot of sense. And because we've invested so much money, unprecedented amounts of money, really, into the electrifying cars, we also now have storage technologies able to solve for intermittency problems. So what that means is making electric lights go on even when the wind is not blowing or the sun is not shining. Now, but in Africa, and let's talk about Africa for a second, businesses really have a bit of a different problem, and that's power is often not there. So when I'm in South Africa or in Nigeria, businesses often don't have power for many hours a day from the grid. And if there is power, it's really expensive because they either have to self-generate it from a diesel or gas generator, or if it's there from the grid, the tariffs are often very, very high. So the starting point for African business is really tough. Power is not there, or it's really expensive, and now the world is electrifying and moving renewables. And where does it leave us here in Africa? It's a really tough starting point. And this is what Daystar Power, the company I co-founded in 2017, I'm running as CEO, really tries to solve. We want to help African businesses participate in this electrification journey and renewable energy today. So we don't want to wait for 10, 20, 30 years for governments to build grids and power stations and all these wonderful things. We want to start it really today, right and now. And we do it in a decentralized fashion. We don't use the grid. We build our systems at our clients' premises, decentralized, providing independence from national grids, external energy supply. And these are hybrid solar systems typically. They consist of solar panels, battery storage, a grid connection, and often a diesel and gas generator in case, yes, the sun doesn't shine, the battery isn't sufficient for it. And with these solutions, we offer 3 key advantages to our customers. We cut their power costs and their carbon footprint through the use of solar power. Second, we increase power production. We have more power available suddenly, so they can really electrify. And thirdly, we increase stability of their power supply by the use of battery storage. And that is really powerful and really helps businesses, quite practically, improve their operations, be more profitable, and compete with their peers in Asia, in Europe, and the US. So we're currently active in 7 countries in Africa: Nigeria, South Africa, Ghana, Senegal, Cote d'Ivoire, Tanzania, and Togo. And if any one of you is interested in renewable energy, solar power, going green, cutting power cost, whatever the motivation may be, feel free to reach out, and we're happy to serve you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jasper. That was great. So I think before we dive into the guts of what Daystar Power does and how you help businesses, I think I'd like to go a bit deeper into what are the problems that, say, with power distribution in Nigeria and also across Africa that you experience, that businesses experience, and like why do they exist? So why is it so expensive to tap into the grid? Why are there common power outages? Run us through some of those problems.
Quels sont les problèmes auxquels vous faites face?
Donc, on va commencer certainement avec le Nigeria. Donc, au Nigeria, nous avons les mini-réseaux qui sont quand même disponibles. Et d'abord, d'entrée de jeu, il a fallu plancher sur la privatisation du secteur. Parce que là, il fallait investir énormément dans le secteur parce qu'il fallait travailler sur le volet du transport de l'énergie et de sa production. Parce qu'il ne faudrait pas compter sur l'énergie qui émane, n'est-ce pas, des réseaux. Donc il faut travailler.
That's just how it is. Some businesses do not set up there at all. So if you're in glass manufacturing, for instance, you don't go to Nigeria. The power instability could ruin your machines too easily. You just don't do it. So it's a very complicated topic, but it goes beyond just technical reasons. It's about the whole system, how it's set up. And it's been like that in Nigeria for a long time. South Africa is a bit different. I used to live in South Africa when South Africa started with load shedding. Load shedding meaning they cut off power during the day. So when they first started, I was living there, and I thought, oh, well, it'll be probably over in a year, they'll fix it. They haven't fixed it. It's gotten a lot worse. And now when I talk to my team in South Africa, in Johannesburg or in Durban, very often like, Jasper, just to let you know, in 5 minutes there's load shedding, so if the internet connection cuts off, just so you know that's the reason. And what is behind all this? It's, I think, a persistent lack of investment in the industry. There's the incentives are not set up right. And at the end of the day, power companies in Africa have resisted renewable energies, resisted players like us for a very long time because they want to keep the customers to themselves. And now with all these problems, they're finally letting companies like us come in.
Awesome. Thanks for speaking to that. I think that gives me like a much better idea of, hey, like what are the problems with power in these countries and what's it preventing us from doing? It sounds like having these off-grid or decentralized solutions to power can really help businesses become more flexible and set up anywhere. I'd like to go a bit deeper into that. Like, what are some of the benefits that you've seen these businesses have from working with Daystar Power? Yeah.
So one of the key benefits, and I didn't talk about that earlier, is speed, right? So power infrastructure takes a long time, right? So building a power plant can take years. So in Finland, they just opened a new nuclear power plant for all the nuclear proponents here. I think it took more than 10 years to build, right? So that doesn't solve issues today. I mean, 10 years, that's a long time. So what we do is we install systems in 6 weeks, right? A customer comes to us and says, oh, my power costs are too high, can you solve it? We visit, we look at his infrastructure, we look at the roof space he has, we design a system, solar panels, batteries, etc., and we install within 6 weeks. And what will it do? It will reduce his power cost because the solar power we produce is cheaper than any other power source he has. Then the second thing we do is, if we have battery storage that we build in, we increase the reliability. You know, generators are not reliable. They need a lot of maintenance, they go off. They're really unreliable, actually, because they actually were built, in most countries, they're used for emergencies. If you want to buy a generator in Europe, the one you use in Nigeria for power production, they're called emergency generator. And it's what hospitals buy in case you have a short power outage. So we bring the stability, we bring this power cost reduction, and we do it very, very quickly.
Unreal. Thanks for highlighting, I guess, how you work and the benefits of working with Daystar. It's awesome. I think a congratulation is in order because last year Daystar Power was acquired by Shell, so congrats. It gives us a bit of an insight into, oh yeah, we'll clap for that one. So, I mean, Daystar Power is the first company that Shell has acquired on the continent. And so I wanted to ask about that. Do you think that we can expect more global players trying to enter power and solar in Africa?
I do believe so. So global players have been testing the water for many years already, right? They've done minority investments, and you have utility companies from Europe, you have PE companies globally, strategic players, and they've all been investing and testing the waters, they've been checking it out. And I do truly believe there'll be a lot more of that now. And we've seen a lot of amazing developments, particularly in distributed solar space, huge deals actually in recent times, of investments coming onto the continent. So there's been us, of course, but there's been also companies like Yellow Door Energy from the Middle East, which has done a $400 million deal moving into Africa. So we're going to see a lot more than that because the power problems are real. They're existential, and we do need to solve them.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Jasper. So we're going to do maybe one question from the crowd this time. Yes, go for it. You, yeah. Would you like to? It's fine.
So my name is Owen Mogiafu, and I represent Transco. So I just thought because this is an international room, I just wanted to address a few of the comments you've made. So we understand our sector properly, and Transco actually accounts for about 18% of Nigeria's power. And yeah, there's a whole lot of room. But you know, when we come into this summit is also to create an avenue to see what is available in there. So
nous ne recevons pas celle qui intervient, on n'entend pas ce qu'elle dit.
Power plants. I just commissioned one 2 weeks ago, and I know how long it took to get it to completion. We heard the gentleman talk about logistics issues not too long ago. So there are quite a number of issues that affect the effective generation, transmission, and distribution of power across the continent. But like any investor knows, when there are issues, what about opportunities for you to go in there and make the good impact that you need can get? And that is what Transcorp stands for. Thank you.
Thank you for that. That's a really good comment, and thanks for highlighting the different ways that we can solve this problem. Jasper, do you want to respond to that, or did you have a specific question, or?
Just a comment because, was kind of a bit of, everything that was done, when there's power is the exception. Not necessarily. It's, I understand where you're coming from, but not necessarily. If you're following Nigerian story, we are recently undergoing this whole
Nous n'entendons pas, elle n'utilise pas le micro, on n'entend pas.
used to the problem, to the kind of systemic, cyclical thing
Yeah.
that's going on. Congratulations on the shell to Vista. They are coming on now to one of my plants. So welcome. Congratulations. Definitely, let's talk more. But I just thought with this whole room,
Yeah.
they need to understand that.
Jasper, I'll give you a minute to respond to that.
Yeah, wonderful. No, and I think we love that the grid's getting better, and we hope it does, right? Because the technical problems we have with our systems are all related to not having the grid, actually. So in Ghana, our systems, they work seamlessly, no problems, no issues because it's grid. In Nigeria, we have armies of technicians who solve the intricacies of integrating with generators and the power systems and frequency issues from the grid when it's there. So there's no bigger proponent and advocate for improving the grid than us. However, one thing that I would say is, companies need solutions very quickly. We have clients that are really not barely on the grid, who do have 3 hours of power maybe a day, right? These clients exist, these companies exist, and they really bleed margin, and they need solutions today, and that's what we do, right? So I think all of us players in the power space, we have a role to play, and I'm very glad that Transcorp is doing so much, and I met your CEO a few years ago on a panel, and a fantastic person. So really glad about that. And I think we all have a role to play, but it's a huge challenge. And there's really a role for everyone.
Thanks so much, Jasper. Appreciate it. Let's hear it for Jasper. Okay, time to introduce our next disruptor. I'm introducing Rashmi Pillai to the stage, Head of Public Policy at Wave Mobile Money. Really excited for this one. Let's hear it for Rashmi.
Thank you, Caleb, and thank you, organizers, for having us on board. It's a pleasure and honor to be here. As Caleb mentioned, my name is Rashmi Pillai. I'm the Group Head of Public Policy for Wave Mobile Money, one of the few fintech startup unicorns on the African continent. I have 8 minutes, and the topic given to us by the organizers is bank dominance coming to an end? So clearly they want us to spice up the conversation. I will walk you through a background of Wave, and then I'll present my arguments to the topic that was given to us. Wave is a fintech company. We're not a telecom. We're not a bank. We do cash deposits. We convert cash in the economy into e-value or electronic money. So there's cash in, cash out services. Today, payment services, exactly like Ida mentioned, merchant payments, bill payments, etc. And we do it in a manner that's radically affordable. We do not charge for deposits. We do not charge for withdrawals. And it's 1% on transfers. We're also radically inclusive. We're incredibly and ruthlessly customer-centric. And that has been our design thesis and philosophy since day one. We launched our operations in Senegal in 2018, and in a matter of 4 years became the dominant provider of the country. We are present in 80% of the households in Senegal use Wave. And to give you another metric, one of the metrics that mobile money providers use is, if I send $1 to Caleb, how many times is that dollar circulating in your ecosystem, in the mobile money ecosystem? In the case of Senegal today, in 4 years, the amount of money that circulates through the Wave ecosystem is greater than 45% of Senegal's GDP. In 2019, we launched in Côte d'Ivoire, and we're on our way to replicate the success that we have had in Senegal. In 2022, or the end of 2021, we had a Series A round of $200 million at a valuation of $1.17 billion. We're very lucky and supported by some incredible investors. And then we got licensed by the BCAO as an e-money regulator in Senegal. Today, we're present in 6 countries on the African continent, multiple Waymo markets, and Uganda being the first Anglophone market. And in the next 10 years, in the theme of this event and conference, we hope to 3x our footprint on the African continent. So, coming back to this very spicy topic that was given, is bank dominance coming to an end? I'll present 3 arguments on this topic, on why I think it's very difficult to say whether there was any real dominance when it comes to formal financial service provision on the African continent. And in case you find this entire topic, speech, boring, I'll give you the net conclusion as well, up front. Which is that the future of African financial services is that banks are going to be the back-end financial service provision, and fintechs are going to be the front end of what consumers know and what it is going to look like in terms of financial service provision. So first argument, banks were never dominant. They were the only service provider that could offer financial services for over a century on this continent, right? So you can look at dominance through 3 metrics. You can say, okay, were they dominant by the virtue of the percentage of population that they reached? Were they dominant because of the dominant position, their dominance on other competitors? Or were they dominant due to profitability? If you look at the statistics by the World Bank on financial inclusion, if you look at 2011, let's just travel back, financial inclusion in most sub-Saharan countries stood at very low double digits. That was in a good case scenario. Financial services were exclusively, at that time, and we are talking about formal financial services, were provided by banks. So if you look at just reach, the banks had very little reach. In contrast, today, we talk about 2023, more than 45% of the adults in sub-Saharan Africa are financially included. And that happened because of the advent of mobile money. The percentage of bank accounts between 2011 and 2022 on the African continent stayed the same, relatively stayed the same. It was mobile money that just completely disrupted what happened. And today there are 730 million mobile money accounts on sub-Saharan Africa. And remember, the population is only 1.18 billion. So the only real dominance, if you talk about dominance, when it comes to financial service provision that was happening, was not formal service providers, it was not banks, it was not fintechs, it still is informal financial service providers. It's your moneylender on the street, it's your SACCO, it's your village savings groups. Those are the people that still today financially included African businesses and African adults. Now, so let's look at the second metric, the third metric, which is profitability. Here's where the banks shine. They have an incredibly good business model, serving very wealthy clients and the upper middle class. They are designed to serve this community. But then the question becomes, can you really be dominant at the expense of a population that has neither access and cannot use your services? I would say that strategy has worked well so far in the past. It may not work as well in the future. Argument 2, telecom and fintech-led mobile money services changed financial inclusion on the continent. In turn, these type of providers ended up making banks richer and much stronger than they have been before. So mobile money solved one of the biggest challenges in the financial sector. How do you get deposits into the financial sector cheaply? It's been a very big challenge. So how do you get cash from people who have kept cash under the mattress, the traders who have cash in their sacks? How do you get cash that is in buses from different parts of African cities that are going to the village? How do you get all of this cash into the formal financial sector? And how do you do it cheaply? So today, as of mobile money, if you look at mobile money infrastructure and compare it to the banks, so bank infrastructure, when you talk about that, you're talking about ATMs, you're talking about bank branches, and you look at mobile money infrastructure, you're talking about agents. And you do a comparison, and mobile money agent infrastructure is 100 times more dense than bank infrastructure in countries where you have both. So the level of access that mobile money brought to the economy is very, very high. And it was done at 1/4 the cost of customer acquisition of banks. Now, mobile money providers, interestingly, are required to park all of this capital with banks. They are parked in escrow accounts. There are hundreds and millions of dollars parked in multiple bank escrow or trust accounts, making the balance sheets of banks become much more stronger than they've ever been. Another point is that banks and mobile money providers earn interest on these escrow accounts. Countries where there are EMI regulations, the mobile money providers are allowed to invest a percentage of the money that you have in your escrow accounts in treasury bills or treasury bonds, so all kinds of risk-free assets. Like, for example, for Wave, this was the first year where we invested in Senegalese government bonds. It's permitted. But then the question becomes, well, who helped Wave do this financial intermediation? You know, from taking deposits to investing them in risk-free assets. It's banks. It's the treasury and corporate investment banking teams of various banks that are our partners. And they make respectable margin. So mobile money, in turn, turned out to be a big boon for banks that caught up and were ready to work with mobile money providers. And last argument, which is the future of financial services. We believe that the future of financial services is 3D. The 3Ds are disaggregation, disintermediation, and the democratization of financial services. Disaggregation means the breaking up or the disruption of a value chain. So when you look typically at if you look at banks in particular, you're thinking of, okay, if I'm a customer of a bank, traditionally 20 years ago, I'll open a savings account. Over time, maybe I'll get a debit card, credit card. So I'm making payments with the same issuance of card issuance by the bank provider. If I need a home loan, if I need some kind of credit, if I start a business, I go back to the same bank, negotiate with them, and then maybe I will need some retirement money, so make some investments through the bank selling that product, or use their very expensive remittance services like for international transfers. But today I have like 10 different apps on my phone for each of those services. I have an app for payments, I have an app for insurance, I have an app for pensions, I have an app for securities investment. The entire thing has been broken up. There's a disaggregation of who controls the financial sector value chain. There are different competencies that have come to play. Second one, disintermediation. Financial sector intermediation, that is moving money from deposits to lending them out to people and businesses, or you're investing them in assets, has always been bank dominated. This is what banks do. They are financial sector intermediaries. But now we are in a world of disintermediation. A great example is digital credit, but done by fintechs on the continent and globally. Fintechs are using their own equity capital or other types of capital to give credit. They're giving nano credit, digital credit, and they're solving Africa's $350 billion credit problem. And the last thing they're doing is the democratization. You have wealth techs, insurtechs, you have SendWave, TransferWise, all of these global remittance companies that have now started with very different DNA from banks, that have started participating actively and shaping what customer choice and voice looks like in the financial sector. These emerging technologies and business models have achieved one massive change, that has never been seen before. They made financial services accessible to the people. They kept the needs of the people at the center, and that is what we need in Africa today if we really want universal financial inclusion. So in conclusion, is bank dominance coming to an end? I think you must have realized, just like me, that mobile money or fintechs would not have succeeded without banks, and the banks of today wouldn't have grown stronger without the partnerships and competition that came with fintechs. The only real winner here should and always be is the customer. But we still are in a situation where more than half, 55% of sub-Saharan adults are completely financially excluded from formal financial services. So we have a really, really long way to go. And hopefully with progressive regulation and better policies, we will get there. So as Caleb mentioned, as we talk about the African sovereignty or the Free Continental Trade Agreement, I hope we keep in mind that the real prosperity rests on partnerships and not on one entity dominating over the other. Thank you.
Thank you, Rashmi. That was great. Come have a seat. It's hot, isn't it?
C'était fantastique. Je pense que c'est beaucoup de données sur la position de FinTech. Où est-ce que la banque? C'était assez inspirant. Vous êtes allé vraiment en profondeur du débat. Je pense que je vais passer la parole à l'audience pour voir s'il y a des questions. Qui a une question à poser, s'il vous plaît? Je pense que nous avons appris beaucoup de tout ce qui a été dit.
Co-opetition, yeah, you're absolutely right. I'm with you.
Sorry, was that competition or?
Co-opetition, where you co-opt your competitors as well for the greater part of the pie.
Can you tell me a bit more about that? How is Wave or like?
I'll give you a great example, right? From East Africa, where I'm from. So everybody's heard the Safaricom M-Pesa store. One of the biggest profit-making products in that story is M-Shwari, which is microcredit, the nano credit piece. But by regulation, your Safaricom or M-Pesa cannot do credit. They're not a bank. They're not licensed to do that. They partnered with a bank called NCBA. So the way the product works is Rashmi saves a small amount of money on her M-Pesa account and a percentage. So if you save $10, you can get up to $30 as credit from M-Pesa, right? And it's the bank that lends you that money.
Yeah.
That bank was actually not even in the top 10 of the list of banks in Kenya. And once they launched with Safaricom, M-Pesa, they had several millions of accounts in less than a quarter that opened. So it's like, are they competing with each other in a financial sector? Absolutely they are. And NCBA completely dominated that product till date and expanded all over East Africa with that product.
That's unreal. Thanks, Rashmi. Unfortunately, we have to round out there to move on to the other sessions, but we should do a further session next time. Thanks so much. Okay, let's move on to our next disruptor, Kenna, the CEO of Relief. Welcome. Let's hear it for Kenna.
Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. My name is Kenna Nzewi, and I'm the co-founder and CEO of Relief. At Relief, we use technology to enable the direct supply or interaction with smallholder farmers to get their crops, process them, and then bring them to large food manufacturers. The topic that I was given today was if artificial intelligence can be used to solve the problem of food insecurity. So I'll start by describing the problem of food insecurity that exists in the market, what Relief does about it, and the potential that AI and large language models have for the future of the industry. So to first start with the problem that is food insecurity, If you look around the continent, 1 in 5 Africans go to bed hungry. And so we have a major issue of food insecurity. And that issue comes from 3 root causes, as the way we see it at Relief. And so those root causes are yields, logistics costs, and inefficient processing. And so when I'm talking about yields, I'm talking about the fact that you have a piece of land, you have the potential to get maybe 10 bushels of grain out of it, and you only get 1 or 2. And so as a result of you not being able to produce a lot of food from the piece of land that you have to charge a very high price for that food. It's simple supply and demand dynamics that occur. That issue is also coupled with post-harvest loss. And so even what is harvested may not find its way to market. The second issue has been, we've spoken quite a bit about it, and it's the cost of logistics. I'm not going to belabor that point. Africa has the most expensive logistics costs. And when you look at agricultural commodities, because they are low value, or maybe let's say a commodity costs $100 per ton, when you exist in a market where the cost of logistics are very high, let's say $50 per ton to bring a crop from farm to market, the cost of logistics ends up adding a significant amount of cost to the overall price of that commodity. And so especially in low value agricultural commodities, this can make food very, very expensive and make life difficult for smallholder farmers. And then the third issue, and one that we're very passionate about at Relief, is the cost of food processing. Now, what you will see throughout the continent is that smallholder farmers use inefficient means to extract valuable commodities from their raw crops, right? And so the goal of a food processor is effectively to take a raw commodity and get the highest percentage of output out of that crop. And when smallholder farmers use rudimentary tools like rocks or use the road to dry their crops, they miss out on the opportunity to extract the full value from those crops and get paid for it. And so as a result of these 3 issues, food is very expensive and there is food insecurity. If you look at Nigeria, where I come from, the cost of food for the average Nigerian takes up about 56% of their income. And so this is a massive issue and really sits at the base of Africa really being able to stand up and become a prosperous continent. And it's a problem that we are solving at Relief. And so as a company, we have built 3 different technology solutions to address the 3 root causes that I've talked about. And these solutions can continue to be improved by the addition of AI and large language models. And so the first issue of yields, or getting the right amount of crop out of your farm and avoiding post-harvest loss, we solve with a software solution called SALT. SALT enables agents or employees of our company to meet with smallholder farmers, onboard them, provide financing, and help them become more productive farmers. To improve on the cost of logistics, the second issue, we have designed a geospatial platform that we call SITE. So what SITE enables us to do is first use machine learning to be able to see where crops are growing throughout the continent, and then being able to, at the time of purchase of those crops, to optimize the route of picking up those crops before taking them to a center of processing. Now, when you work with smallholder farmers, the challenge and the opportunity for technology is in the fact that you are conducting microtransactions. And so a microtransaction might be a transaction with the farmer of $500 or $300. And so there is a great need to drive efficiency over those microtransactions in order to be successful overall. And SITE enables us to basically plan and perform route optimization. And then the third piece, inefficient processing, is solved by technology that we've developed. So in the first value chain where our company operates, which is sustainable oil palm, we have invented and patented an oil palm nut deshelling technology, which we call Kraken because it cracks nuts. This technology is used to improve the yield of vegetable oil and also prevent a loss of oil due to quality issues. Now, to address the question of how AI can continue to spur the industry along, as I mentioned with SITE, we're already using things like machine learning to solve problems, right? And so there already exists a capability to take large amounts of data and find a point of optimization. And I would call that machine learning in the most general sense. Now, the AI wave and revolution that we are entering today is featuring large language models. And these large language models basically make it easier for an average day person to ask a very complicated question of a system, and that system is able to figure out what is being asked for, perform that analysis, and then be able to spit out an answer that the person can understand. And so we see a massive opportunity for assistive AI in the market. And so the way that we like to think about it, and the way I'll relate it to our software products, LLMs can help our field agents to basically have the manager in their pocket, which basically means if I go to a farm and I want to purchase crops, and normally I would call my manager to see if we can make the purchase or if it makes sense, I can instead prompt a large language model, and it will use the information about our previous supplies to understand where if profit can be made, and basically I will be able to get a go or no-go decision. And so we think that there's an opportunity for a higher level of productivity, especially at the managerial level within these smallholder value chains, for a lot of the decision-making to be automated with large language models. The second piece is on logistics, right? And so we can already use machine learning to understand where crops are, but the route optimization problem in solving it or flagging issues that have occurred relative to our expectations can be much more easily driven with large language models. And so instead of just being able to spit out answers, which we can do today, there's an opportunity to analyze past performance and say, hey, this deal, we thought we'd make $10 on it and we actually made $5. What were the issues? And so there's a way in which large language models can prompt reflection and analysis of past deals to inform the way that we move forward. And then the last piece of AI and how it can impact processing. At the end of the day, a lot of food processing is done at an atomic level, right? So you have a piece of machine, it's probably using a mechanical force or perhaps a chemical process to extract a valuable commodity from a raw material. Our belief is that a lot of the efficiency gain in processing comes from the atomic level, but when it comes to deciding when to process goods and sell them and to understand pricing trends, there is a big opportunity for AI to help companies become more successful. And we're seeing firms like Grow Intelligence, that was founded by an African, making some of these impactful decisions and helping large food processors understand when to purchase, process, and sell crops at the end of the day. So to round things out overall, I would say that AI is going to be an incredible force, especially for enabling better services provided to smallholder farmers. We have an opportunity to create a world where agents can come from a community and basically have a PhD that helps them advise smallholder farmers in their communities. And so we look forward to an opportunity and a market where there is more of a gig opportunity for agricultural extension services that can make food production more efficient and solve the issue of food insecurity. Thank you.
Nice, Kenna, that was awesome. Thanks for giving us that deep dive into Relief and into how AI is being used in agriculture. I think that was a really cool breakdown of the problem. I'm going to ask you a question that's a bit off script, if you don't mind.
Let's do it.
I think Relief's a really, really fascinating company in the way that it helps these farmers like change the supply chain process and the food processing. So I'd love to just ask you, how is food processed before Relief, and then how's it processed after Relief, when Relief's in the picture?
Yeah, so we operate in the oil palm sector, and we specifically focus on palm kernels. So palm kernels are the seed of a palm fruit. They have a hard outer shell, and within that shell there is a sort of soft solid, which is about 50% oil. And so the oil that comes from this seed is very similar to coconut oil. Now, smallholder farmers today use rather rudimentary means to process these palm kernels. They use tools as rudimentary as rocks to literally pop open these kernels, or very, very rudimentary mechanical systems that oftentimes, in the process of breaking the shell, also break open the kernel. And when you break open the kernel of this palm kernel, it begins to rot. In our industry, the oil begins to convert into acid, but the result is the same, post-harvest loss. I'm now not able to extract as much of a valuable commodity from a raw material that I purchased.
Awesome. And now using Relief, I mean, how does that change? Because you mentioned the Kraken, which is the best named machinery I've heard. But tell us about how the Kraken steps into that process.
Yeah, so the way our value chain works is we meet farmers where they're at. We purchase their nuts. We then transport them to Kraken. We perform deshelling. And then from there, we supply vegetable oil to large food factories. So our insight as a company is that smallholder farmers in oil palm are at about 10% efficiency. So a farmer could be making 10 times as much money from just being a better farmer. And so we believe that there is an important division of labor that needs to occur in our industry, where farmers focus on farming and food processors focus on food processing. And so our goal is to use salt and the agronomic advice that we provide to farmers to help them increase their efficiency, and then we handle the process of offtake and processing.
That's awesome. Thanks, Kenna. Any questions from the audience? Yes.
Quick question. In the first part of the yields, there is a whole area around soil suitability, extension service and advice. I just want to know how you handle that, because there's been a big component of productivity that is linked to the quality of the soil. So I don't know if you handle that also, because it ends up pushing the yields up.
Yeah, it's a great question. So I think different crops have varying opportunities for optimization via soil quality. Oil palm is probably not the best example in the market, and the reason why is oil palm is a tree, right? So it's a tree that takes about 5 years to grow, and then it's productive for 30 years. So it's difficult to meet a farmer and say, hey, pick up your tree and move it to this other plot of land. You'll get better yield. You can't uproot the trees. And so I think the question that then has to be asked is, as farmers replant or continue to invest in their oil palm business, how do you provide them with that information, right? And so at Relief, our software product site is able to understand some of those soil conditions so we can provide more of that advisory work. As a seed stage business, we focus more so on building relationships and trust with farmers through offtake of their products and the provision of loans. And we think that that is key, building trust with farmers before you become the big person that's telling them exactly what to do with their farm. At the end of the day, smallholder farmers rely on these farms to feed their families. They are the source of their livelihood. And so as a company, I think one needs to be humble and thoughtful about building trust with farmers before you become a commander of what a farmer should do. And so it's a process of education for those farmers.
Awesome. Thanks, Kenna. I think we'll call it there, and thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks.
Okay, cool. Moving on to our last disruptor today, we have Gregory Roxon, CEO of M Pharma. Welcome. Come up, Gregory.
Thank you. I know they were texting me because I literally just got up from the airport here. So it's a pleasure to be here. My task is simple. Question is, can Africa be a healthcare technology powerhouse? But to answer that question, I think it's important to sort of rehash some of the statistics. I think we've all heard a dozen times about the healthcare access gap on the continent. In 2019, even though the continent accounted for 16% of the world's population, it also accounted for over 23% of the world's disease burden. The WHO says that by 2030, the continent will need over 6 million new healthcare workers. The reality is that we don't have time. We cannot build all this infrastructure quick enough to be able to close the healthcare access gap that we face. And Africa's journey to be a prosperous continent cannot happen without healthy people. If we are sick, productivity will be low, and the more people take time recovering from their illness, the less companies can actually generate the returns that most CEOs in today's audience are here to talk about. So for us, the question remains, how do we build a health system that gives each community access to a primary health care center? Now, I'll start by telling how not to do it, and then how technology drives that. And I'll start with my own home country of Ghana, where in the 1990s, we embarked on one of the most ambitious projects to scale access to basic healthcare services called the CHIPS compound. CHIPS stands for Community Health Planning, Community Health-Based Planning Services. And the idea was simple: put a basic health facility in communities where there are no hospitals, run by community health nurses that can be able to provide outpatient services linked to a district hospital. However, there was a challenge with the math. It cost over $130,000 to establish a single CHIPS compound. And the annual operating cost is over $10,000. Yet, each CHIPS compound is able to generate just about $2,200 in annual revenue. The cost to operate a CHIPS compound, about 60% of that cost goes into just healthcare personnel. Now, I am not a health economist, but I mean, these numbers don't really add up. No wonder today, a lot of CHIPS compound in my home country of Ghana are failing and collapsing. I believe that an answer to addressing the primary healthcare gap on the continent is where technology can make Africa a powerhouse. And we've seen that happen with some technology companies like Uber and Airbnb, where leveraging the power of technology, they were able to open up limitless supply in their industries to be able to match growing demand without the need to continue to invest in the capex to be able to serve that demand that they were generating. So what would be that equivalent in the health system? At M-Pharma, our belief is that the community pharmacy is that answer. Most Africans rely on the community pharmacy for their basic primary health care needs, because the primary mode through which most people get primary health care is through self-medication. It's a financial decision, actually, because when you walk into a pharmacy, you get to speak with a pharmacist free of charge, and then they get to give you your medication if you need one. Whilst if you start your care journey in a clinic or a hospital, you have to pay for that doctor's time, and then they may recommend some lab work, which you also have to pay for, and then they'll write a prescription, which you also have to pay for. So for most people who have to rely on out-of-pocket expenditure to pay for their healthcare needs, it's a financial decision to start that journey within a pharmacy. So at M-Pharma, we believe that the pharmacy provides us with a huge opportunity to create almost limitless supply to reimagine how primary healthcare can be delivered in communities across the continent. And so we built our company strategy across 3 core pillars we call receive, deliver, and pay. Under the receive pillar, our question is simple. How do people experience their health system? In a survey, we asked patients, between proximity of care and quality of care, what is the most important factor that determines where you get health care? The answer surprised us. Most of us will say quality, but most people pick proximity. Because at the end of the day, when you wake up with that headache, that cough, you are not looking for the hospital with the best GE equipment. You want a hospital with a basic, that has a healthcare worker that's actually there when you go there. Medicines that are there when they prescribe that medicine are not the fanciest technology. And so people pick proximity. And for us, community pharmacies represent that proximity to care that most communities have access to. And so we built our Quality RX program where we are investing in community pharmacies to transform the physical space into spaces convenient for providing care that goes beyond just medication dispensation. Under the deliver pillar, we ask a simple question. What is the care team that needs to exist within a pharmacy if it is to expand the type of clinical care services that it can offer? We know a pharmacist is not enough, but a pharmacist is a primary healthcare worker that works within a pharmacy. So we realized that to really transform our ability to deliver additional clinical care services within a pharmacy, we had to integrate within that care coordination team a nurse and a physician. Well, there are not that many physicians that we could hire to actually scale the ability to provide each community with a family physician. And that's where technology comes in. We built our technology platform called Bloom that allows us to create care pathways and workflows and then integrate within the pharmacy access to virtual doctors so that whenever a patient visits that pharmacy, they get access to a nurse, because we actually have a lot of community health nurses who need jobs. And we could actually use that talent arbitrage to be able to equip each pharmacy with a nurse that joins the pharmacist as a physical healthcare worker within that space. And then whenever the nurse sees a patient and they feel that they need a doctor's intervention, they can send in a request and the doctor joins virtually. But today, the beauty of technology is that we've been able to build a lot of remote diagnostic tools that brings the capabilities that exist within a physician office, like a stethoscope, an otoscope, into a remote diagnostic device where doctors can take remote control of this device wherever they are and be able to perform lung examinations, heart examinations, look into your ears because of the live video capabilities. And that has allowed us to ensure that even as we provide virtual care, it is not substandard care, because doctors are able to perform the same type of medical examinations that they would want to do if you were with them in person. And finally, under pay, is whilst the majority of patients pay out of pocket for their healthcare needs, the question remains that falling sick is not a decision that someone makes when they wake up, and it's a catastrophic cost. And so for us to be able to remove further barriers that prevent most people from seeking care, we have to address how do people pay for it. And so within M-Pharma, we've created several payment services. One, working with drug companies like Roche, we rolled out a program we call Heal Now, Pay Later, that has allowed us to increase access to breast cancer care in Nigeria. We've recently been piloting a health subscription plan that costs less than $1.90 a month. That provides patient access to basic primary health care for over 14 diseases and a basket of over 150 medication that if any of the doctors on our panel prescribes, patients do not have to pay out of pocket for it. So in conclusion, I believe that Africa has the opportunity to create homegrown solutions that we don't only use for ourselves, because the problems that we solve in Africa are not only Africa-related problems, but are emerging market problems. And we can actually become an exporter of health technology that enables other countries that are grappling with the same challenges when it comes to closing the healthcare access gap with a limited healthcare workforce and infrastructure that is not scalable in its present form. So on this note, thanks, and yeah.
Thanks, Gregory. That was brilliant. I'm going to ask you a question, and then I'll take it to the audience to ask a question as well. And then we'll move on from there. So my question is, in the same way that we kind of leapfrogged the landline and jumped straight to phones, what do you think of healthcare? Do you think that there's an opportunity for healthcare in Africa to also leapfrog and skip some of the traditional building blocks that healthcare has gone through in other countries?
I think for a bit, but healthcare is not a technology problem per se, because in healthcare it's about people, it's about emotions. It's not an app where I go in and I load a transaction and it goes without any human interface. You cannot replace healthcare workers. You need a doctor, because most often people, when they are sick, are in their most vulnerable states, and they need that reassurance. There was this recent research where, with AI, they rolled out some mental health bots that used AI, and it was working. But once people realized it was an AI, utilization dropped because they didn't actually want to talk to an AI. They wanted to talk to a human being who they believe would empathize with where they are. What I believe technology allows us to do on leapfrog is the issue of resource allocation, right? Because we cannot simply build fast. I mean, how long does it take to train a doctor? Like, it'll take about 9 years to train a doctor, right? I mean, we cannot wait for 9 years to have the next crop of doctors coming up to close that gap. So I think that's an opportunity where we can leapfrog by actually breaking down some of the traditional structures that has made it much more difficult to scale access to care. But finally, I think an area where we can leapfrog, I'm not seeing us do it, but I think we should own it, is that the idea of healthcare today is built around sickness care, right? And if we are to actually leapfrog in healthcare in Africa, I think we need to move from sickness care to wellness care. The idea is that a health system should not be built only to engage people when they fall sick. Because for most of us, that is the point of engagement. I mean, how often do you engage your health system if you are not sick? If you are feeling well, you actually never feel the need to go there. And I think by being able to break down the bias, what we've seen at M-Pharma is that by equipping pharmacies with community health workers, placing in the ability to do wellness visits at no cost to the patient, we've seen more and more people take advantage of that. I'll give you a quick statistic. Now, we ran a small program in Ghana where we created a wellness benefit. And before creating a wellness benefit, we looked at what was the health-seeking behavior of this cohorts of people that were in the pilots. Well, in the 6 months before the pilots, they had visited their healthcare facilities 86 times. Once we created this wellness package, made it no cost to them, the 6 months after the pilot, they had visited their healthcare facilities 343 times. Right? Almost 2.5x what they did before that, right? And I think that is part of how we can leapfrog. It's around really reimagine healthcare from a sickness standpoint to a preventative wellness healthcare standpoint.
Unreal. Yeah, thanks for that deep insight, Gregory. That was awesome. Question from the audience. Yes, very enthusiastic hand there. Wow.
I hope your mom does not hate me, seriously. Thanks. When I was younger, I used to pick a lot of battles. And now I've learned to choose which battles I pick and which ones I do not pick. But yes, as a company that started its journey in English-speaking Africa, we have made it an effort, and we failed, at some point, starting, and actually, we used to have an office in Côte d'Ivoire at some point, but the regulations did not allow us to be able to drive the type of vision that we had. But we've actually not given up. So we've actually come back again to the market. Earlier this year, we created a Francophone Africa strategy focused on Togo, Benin, DRC. We've actually started investing in Togo, where we've been opening multi-pharmacies in Togo. I'll tell you, I'm still facing the same challenges that we faced back then, but we have a renewed determination to make it work. And so I think that it requires us collaborating with people like yourself, since you know this market really well, to understand how do we explain the benefits of this new approach to delivering health services to regulators. Because most often, regulation, I believe, should not be seen as a gatekeeper. No, there's no point having a gate shut when people are dying. The point of regulation is not to make people suffer more. The point of regulation is to protect people. And so if a regulation stops protecting people, I think that regulation needs to be reviewed. And so we are playing a more active role, taking data, showing the use cases, engaging government, something I have not liked doing in the past, but we realize that we cannot scale the type of services that we want to build if we don't have governments behind us. So it's definitely a challenge, but it's not easy. I always listen to my friends in the fintech and financial services, and I say, well, in healthcare, it's like, you have multiple regulators who all find it challenging to believe that you need to change the way you do things. But I don't think it's something that would end immediately, but I think we just have to keep pushing.
Thank you so much, Gregory. Appreciate it. Okay, those are our 5 disruptors. To close out the session, I'm going to invite Tim Steele, CEO of Copia Global, to present some closing remarks. Welcome, Tim.
Hi, everyone. Wow, what a great set of stories from some amazing, disrupting companies. I think it's been very inspiring to hear all of them. I think a number of key themes have emerged. So significant problems exist which need disruptive, innovative organizations to leapfrog in order to solve those problems. Secondly, technology, and more importantly, the innovative use of technology, is critical if we're going to solve those problems. Thirdly, connecting the mass market to commerce, products, and services is going to unlock a big piece of development. And then also the economies of the continent are going to be positively impacted through driving production and consumption efficiencies, and by doing good as you grow and doing it quickly. So I think we've all heard and probably read the new McKinsey report, which talks about the size of that mass market. And reaching and unlocking that mass market, I think, is going to be the key deliverable. But it's challenging to do that. Everyone's spoken about low smartphone and internet penetration, the high cost of data, a largely unbanked population, a population that isn't addressed with postcodes. So how do you solve all that? Our company, Copia, has attempted to understand those challenges and find disruptive and innovative solutions to solve them. So we're a digital one-stop shop for e-commerce, financial services, so browse, buy, pay, finance, insure, deliver, return, all on one super simple app in the palm of your hand, designed specifically for the middle to low income mass market consumer. We've managed to reach that consumer, which is one of the key challenges, through building out a network of 55,000 agents, all equipped with a smartphone, 81% women who increase their incomes by around 75% when they become an agent. They all offer more choice, lower prices, no delivery fees, reliable customer-centric service, access to finance, all on one super simple app. So I think the other thing that's come out, and Rashmi talked about co-opetition, is that none of us can do this on our own. Partnership, collaboration, cooperation, co-opetition is going to be critical to success. So I think one thing we can all do here is look for those partnerships. So thanks to all the speakers who shared their experiences today, and I think it gives me great confidence that the journey from 300 to 3,000 billion-dollar companies is possible, but hopefully that there's another journey that runs in parallel, the creation of millions of $1 billion companies, SMEs that benefit from this access that focusing on the mass market will bring. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. That is a wrap. I hope you enjoyed that session. Yeah, that's the session. If anyone would like to come to, I'm hosting an after party for this for founders in the Cote d'Ivoire ecosystem at M Studios. So I have the details. It's on my phone. Just come get them from me if you're interested. Thanks, everyone.